If you want to make this country ineffective, you make the people that are there think that the other people that are there are something less than them or trying to defeat them for some reason. That's the easiest way to do it. Just give them a different name.
Welcome to We Be the Change. I'm Colleen Akiko. This is the second episode in A Collage of War, a conversation series with elder author and my uncle Dan Strawn. This episode is called Just Give Them a Different Name. That phrase comes from Dan's reflection on one of the oldest patterns of war. Before people can be harmed without conscience, they are often renamed. The enemy, the other, dogs, something less than fully human. And Dan brings that pattern uncomfortably close to home. We begin with the language of war, but the conversation comes home to the language of everyday life, the names we call each other, the ways we separate ourselves, and the quiet courage it takes to stay human in divided times. I invite you to listen with your whole heart, not to harden into disagreement or agreement, but to remember the human being on the other side of every name. Here is Just Give Them a Different Name. I so appreciate your bringing the human element into the realities of war. And this is something that many of us have not experienced that much, and many of us have experienced that too much. I remember a conversation that we had recently where you were talking about how do the people responsible for getting us into war and instigating war, how do they get people on that team? And one thing that you mentioned was we dehumanize the enemy.
We do.
Yeah.
We do. I mentioned Alexander the Great. He's a guy that conquered half of Asia and half of North Africa and did all kinds of things. But even he did that. And we did it too. And I'm reminded of my brother telling me when he was in basic training to go to Korea as a machine gunner. That's what they trained him to be. And fortunately, he never had to do that, but that's another story for another day. But before they shipped him out, we, the United States of America, the United States Army, put them all in an auditorium and had Oriental people dressed in North Korean uniforms so that we know what they looked like and made sure they understood the nicknames for them. And I'm not going to go into that because it's, to me, abhorrent. But we didn't call them the enemy. We called them nasty names. And we did that in the Second World War. And not only did we do it, everybody that's in the fighting other people business, evidently, from what I've been able to read, have a name that has, here's one we like, the song Yankee Doodle Dandy. The British Army sang that to our soldiers, laughing at their inexperience at being fighters. You're just a bunch of Yankee Doodle dandies. That's all you are. That's how the song came to be. But we took it and kind of shoved it back at them, as it turned out, because we won that war. And that was a war of defense. It had to be fought. But the point is that what happened, according to my brother, is the officers were telling the enlisted men, okay, that's enough of that. Now we're going to tell you about what happens if you should happen to get captured or get a dose of propaganda. And what happened next was one of the soldiers in the audience said, does anybody know what the definition of propaganda is? That's what the officer said. And my brother started laughing when he told me this. And he said, so one of the guys raises his hands and he says, yes, sir, it's what we just went through. And that didn't have the desired effect in the audience because they all kind of laughed about it and they knew what was happening to him. And I said, what happened to the, what he was, a buck private probably. And my brother said, I don't know what happened, probably nothing. But that's how silly it is. And I see that happening now. We're doing that as civilians now. We're calling our neighbors names. I'm not even going to repeat the names we call each other. You know what we're calling each other. And those are the same people who we need. They're neighbors, your family, your whoever. We cannot expect a Congress to work well with each other when they're calling each other names. I mean, that's an old trick. And it has a desired effect, and we're being swayed into doing that. And I wrote another blog that said we shouldn't be doing that. And that's why, because I don't know if that's what you want to know about that, but that's what I see of it.
Oh, yeah. We think about just words in general, and you as a writer, how important words can be. They're little packages of energy or vibration, and a word that you would put on another person to justify taking them out, so to speak, has got to be full of hatred and disgust, like you don't deserve to live.
Not human. That's the idea. That's okay now. We can kill them.
Exactly.
They're whatever name we've given them.
And I think about the nature of the times that we're living in, the attitudes that collectively are in all of our conversations and what we see on the news and TV, social media. There's a lot of name calling going on. And even if it's not overt, this feeling of I'm okay, but you're not, these separations that are total illusions between us and others, it seems like those find stronger footing in times like this when there's so much fear. And just like how you must have felt when you were told that the Japanese, I'm half Japanese, but the Japanese were sending out balloons to...
You're one of the good things that happened when my brother went to Japan.
Well, thank you. But yeah, just being told that there could be a bomb above your head that's going to explode into flames and destroy things and destroy you, that puts a kind of a edginess in the air. There's so much edginess in the air right now. And I know it takes a concerted intention to circumvent that in order to have human connections with people, especially if they don't hold the same perspective as we do. It's very difficult to stay connected in a warm way with people like that, and yet that is exactly what we're called to do in whatever ways are open for us in this moment in history.
Yeah, I have a couple of things I would say to people faced with those issues. And it's very much appropriate that we draw those parallels between what we're doing and have done historically, and all armies have done, to make soldiers forget their enemy as a human.
Yeah.
When we're trading names like that, it does the same thing. It separates us. If you want to make this country ineffective, you make the people that are there think that the other people that are there are something less than them or trying to defeat them for some reason. That's the easiest way to do it. Just give them a different name. And I have a couple of thoughts. And one is, if you are aligning yourself with somebody in Congress or a senator or a local office or the president or whatever, and that person is using those kinds of names, vote for somebody else, because they're part of the problem. They're part of the problem, and their goal is not to make this country better or make your city better or your county better. It has some other motive. And so I absolutely refuse to vote for people who do that. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm just telling you that's one thing. And then the other thing is, which really brought me to tears when I realized what I'm about to say, is that war that was recently started by surprise. And for the record, the last time that I'm aware of that really happened in our country's history was when we were surprised by the Japanese while we were negotiating with them. That's not what countries do to each other. We're the bullies here. That's my problem. And makes me mad. But there's a bigger price that's paid than just making me mad. When that attack occurred, and you stop and think, and it went in my head immediately when I realized what happened, when you stop and think that several hundred little girls died in Iran because that war took place. And those little girls were denied their life, and they had nothing to do with that war. And what brought the tears to my eyes was thinking about all of the little children and men and women and their moms and dads and grandmothers. It's always those people who pay the price in war. And right now today, this is happening in Gaza, it's happening in Ukraine, it's happening in Russia, it's happening in the Sudan, it's happening around the world. And when I say that I'm not a warrior, but I've grown up with that for 87 years, and it's just to me unanswerable with any kinds of compassion for being a fellow human being that we have to always go to war to settle our differences.
You wrote about this happening, being called collateral damage, when civilians are maimed and hurt and murdered. That we don't say civilians, young girls were bombed and killed in their school today.
It's just collateral damage. That's what
Just collateral
terrible.
damage.
They're not even little girls. They were deprived of falling in love, having children, living old, becoming grandmothers, whatever, who knows?
Yeah.
That's,
And yet, if we saw any of those little girls as our little girl, our niece, our daughter, our next door neighbor whom we love and adore, we would be taking what's going on a lot more to heart. It would be hard for us to sleep at night. And some nights it is that way. And yet, whatever the motivation might be, we don't humanize those that we are at war with. And so the damage and the destruction continues. We're about ready to publish another one of your writings on the We Be the Change blog that really gets to the heart. When we are navigating through the superior intelligence they found of the heart, as opposed to the brain matter that we all have, we make more humane decisions. I really appreciate the wisdom that comes over the decades and into one's 8th decade of life. We're wanting to continue to learn, to understand, and to see ways that could be helpful for those coming after us, our children, our grandchildren. How can their lives be better? And is there something that we can express or leave behind that could be a trail marker for them of some sort? Or maybe we start something that they can pick up the baton on. Or maybe we listen to where they're coming from and hear where their hearts are and what they have to say.
That's a very important point you made. The contact between the generations in terms of discussion and groups, and grandmas to 6th graders, or grandpas, or middle-aged people to older people, or whatever, it's very important for 2 reasons. One is, the older you get, the more you realize not what to do right, but you realize what not to do. Don't do the dumb things. And that's a really important aspect. And I've also done a lot of working with indigenous people, and it makes me wonder why in all of the different religions that you find in the world, the part that we seem to forget when we start to wage war or become mean to other people is they all are based on a simple concept that if you want to have a full life, treat your neighbors like you want to be treated. And I don't care if it's Christ or it's Muhammad or it's Buddha or pick 'em, they all have those elements in there. And I'm convinced that comes from the fact that it's the older people who, in all of those societies, back in the days when we had not necessarily literacy with books, but literacy with the verbal tales being passed on from one generation to the next by informed older people. And it always has to do with treating people like you want to be treated.
Yes.
The thing I've noticed as I've got older, in the last 10 years, I've had to resort to a cane because the balance in my old joints are not what they could be. And the particular neighborhood I live in is not specifically a blue neighborhood or a red neighborhood. It's more like a purple neighborhood. A lot of people are leaning left and a lot of people are leaning right. And what I notice is that there's hope for this country because every day, whenever I go to the store, yesterday I went to the post office and nobody says to me, "Oh, are you a left leaner or a right leaner?" They don't care. They just say, "Oh, can I hold the door open for you?" That makes a difference. And you need to vote what your heart tells you to do, not what you're being told to do, but what your heart tells you to do. And your brain and your heart are connected if you think about it. And they're going to be singing the same song. And
Yes.
the last time I went to the post office was even a different post office. And an old lady who was approaching my age, but was of a different race than I was, stood there and saw me coming out of the post office with one arm full with the mail I had and the other one with the cane. And she waited while I walked 40 steps or so to get to the door just to make sure somebody could open the door for me. Those are the people we're calling names to. They're my neighbors. I don't even know their names, but
Yeah.
they're my neighbors. I was pulling my garbage out to the sidewalk a month or so ago for pickup. And here comes this guy walking across the street who was walking with his lady friend or wife or whatever, about 30 years old. He didn't say anything. He just walked across the street in a diagonal and took this big old heavy garbage can I was pulling along with the wheels. Didn't ask if I needed help. He just took it away and did it and said, "Have a good day," and walked across the street. I didn't know him. He didn't have a name, but he's a neighbor, and his heart of heart is in the right spot. So if we can take that good care of old people, we can do it to everybody, is my point.
Yes.
We
Those
don't have to
people.
wait till somebody gets to be 87.
True.
We can do it when
We can do it at
27.
any age.
You can do it at any age. Waging war and treating people like junk are the same thing. They're not collateral damage. They're human beings.
Thank you for listening to Just Give Them a Different Name, the second episode in A Collage of War with Dan Strawn. What stays with me from this part of the conversation is how quickly language can become a doorway, either toward separation or toward remembering. A name or a story can make someone disappear, but a small act of caring, like holding a door open or helping a neighbor, or refusing to repeat ugliness, these things can return us to the simple and essential truth: they are not the enemy. They are not collateral damage. They are human beings, part of our one Earth family. Thanks for listening. In the final episode of this series, Dan and I will discuss what we can do now, how we vote, how we speak, where we place our attention, how we keep love from becoming merely an idea. If this conversation stirs something in you, you are warmly invited into the Bowl of Light Café. It's a free online gathering place for reflection, restorative practice, and more human conversation. You can find it at SongRise.live. That's SongRise.live. Click the Bowl of Light Cafe link at the top. Thank you for staying with this conversation. Let me end by reading a little postcard that we keep in our pantry. It has a quote from the Dalai Lama. Mutual respect trust, and concern for one another's welfare is our best hope for lasting world peace. Aloha.